Welcome to episode 9 of the Downstream podcast. My name is John Stinson. This week, I interview an occult priestess, Corrine Wilson. Corrine has been a professional psychic for 23 years. Wiccan since the age of 16, read tarot in a nightclub age 17. She blogs, has over 100 videos on her YouTube channel, and has appeared in what has been called a docu-horror and the scariest documentary ever made called The Nightmare, detailing the terrifying aspects of sleep paralysis. So I was excited to find out more about Corrine's journey and her teachings. So Corrine, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to the Downstream podcast. So thank you very much indeed for agreeing to come on to be a guest on the show. And a big hearty welcome. And so first of all, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm excited to be on the show. I feel it's a high caliber show where we can explore deeper subjects and learn more than ever. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, that's great. Well, I'll jump straight in with a question, really, which is that because I follow you on Facebook and you say you're an occult priestess. So I don't really know what an occult priestess is. So would you be kind enough to, for my benefit and for the listeners' benefits, to say what an occult priestess is?
The occult priestess is something that I became. It is a title that I actually was guided to create. And so I had a store called the Occult Shop, and I had a store for about 4 years. And using the word occult so often really got me familiar with, this is really the topic and the subject that I'm most about, the hidden knowledge. It was such a wonderful blanket for the topic, so it covered everything. And I was a Wiccan high priestess for several years, still am technically. And I wanted to reach out to a bigger audience. I was broader, I was bigger, and I was growing. Therefore, I wanted a title that would encompass that as well. And I didn't feel comfortable taking on the mantle of a Buddhist guru. I did have a guru myself. However, I don't feel like I was trained in those specific ways. So I westernized it.
Oh, okay. So the occult priestess is your westernized title that you've created, which could be similar to a Buddhist guru, perhaps.
Indeed, and in a way to where I'm also shamanic, which you've talked about a lot on the show, very exciting topic. So there's a lot of intuition and information coming from higher realms and higher states of consciousness that filters through. Again, that's why the occult kind of covers that entire topic.
Okay. Well,
so it's magical because the guru has magical powers, if you will, the Shaktipat, the darshan, and so does the occult priestess.
Okay, Well, I'd love to dive into that then. So, talk to me about the magical powers then.
Oh, well, I believe that the magic that I've experienced as an observer, as the vessel for the magic happening. It's kind of like love. You don't make it happen. You allow it to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. Yes.
And like I said, I had a guru. She has passed on into the realms of light. And her name was Srimamo Devi, Maria Rose. And she was British as well, but she was from South Africa.
Okay.
And I found in her presence that I was learning deeply. I would have a lot of visions in her presence, and I felt as if there was like a second teacher, a spirit teacher. And I came to learn that was her soul.
Oh, right. Okay. And so how did you meet this your guru, your teacher?
I had become a Reiki master, and through Reiki, my heart wanted to learn Buddhism. It was something about the Reiki that made me want to do a beeline for Buddhism. And it was very early days of the internet. So I
Yeah.
was looking around, with the Eightfold Path and whatnot, and very confused by it. So I sincerely prayed to have a teacher come into my life. And through my Reiki master, I met Sri Mamo Devi.
Hmm. Okay, so yeah. So tell me, I think more about your story, really. About so where did it all start? Because so I think we're sort of almost going backwards a bit here. We've from a cult priestess to and how you've sort of found a guru. But take me right back to the beginning. And when was it that you sort of realised that this was that you were perhaps on a different path to the usual person down the street type of thing?
Unfortunately, I always knew I was strange and different, but I think you'll hear that from just about any shaman.
Yeah.
Uh, I had sleep paralysis, which is also known as a form of psychic attack, since I can remember, since the crib. But even before that, I was told stories that at 3 months old, I was still in the hospital. I had never come home, and I had breathing issues, and that I had passed and come back.
Oh,
And
right.
so some would say that's a very early shamanic death.
Yes.
But that, I believe that I was always aware of the dream realm and the fourth dimension, awake or asleep. And I didn't know that that was different from other people. I thought everyone was kind of in a half dream, half waking state.
Yeah.
The sleep paralysis is very quickly you lay down to go to sleep. And although your consciousness is still very aware, you become paralyzed and cannot move. And for me personally, and many others, there was what they call a hypnagogic hallucination, which is basically seeing in another dimension, a shadow figure, a three-dimensional shadow figure that would approach my bed and felt very dark,
Hmm.
and a lot of voices of darkness and vibrations and craziness, which actually was a precursor to me leaving my body and going out of my body for astral travel.
Okay. And sorry, what sort of age was that? That was quite young?
Yeah, I don't know life without it,
Ah, okay.
honestly.
Right. So from whenever you can remember, that was quite natural to you. So when did you sort of when did it dawn on you that that wasn't what everybody sort of saw and felt?
When I began to get socialized around 6 or 7 years old, my mother had sleep paralysis, and we suspected grandmother as well.
Okay.
However, we were raised Jehovah's Witnesses.
Raised as Jehovah's
We
Witnesses,
didn't
did you say?
speak of such things, and we didn't talk about being sick. Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so that must have been quite difficult, I guess, for both yourself, your mum, and your grandmother, if that was something was taboo and couldn't speak of.
Well, it was grandmother that started it all. She's the one who became the first witness in the family, and a very matriarchal family. So she wore the pants, so to speak, and everyone kind of fell in line. And given the way the teachings are hooked, it's that it's the hook. That's exactly right. It kind of hooks you in. And then some would call it a cult at that point, which is, just a sector of people that all believe the same thing. And if you don't, then you're ostracized.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's no different to Scientology today, I think, is it? Or as you say, any cult. Yeah.
Right. At least Scientology is kind of more interesting.
Yeah, that's very true. It is quite.
However, as a born again conspiracy theorist, I'd like to make that a statement. When I went through my awakening and woke up in several different ways, I realized that the witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses, were speaking about materialism being the devil of this world and greed and being, the negative. And I was like,
Okay.
wow, they were really right on that. That was true.
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, that's actually right on as you're saying. So what was? Tell me about your awakenings then, because you said there are several different ways that you awoke. What And I guess from awakening, we're meaning, yeah. Tell me what you think, what you mean by awakening, first of all.
I had a Kundalini activation type of awakening, which was having my consciousness shoot into the fourth and fifth dimension without my own knowledge of what was going on, really. Having visions, hearing poetry, meeting with gods and goddesses and angels. Wonderful, beautiful things. And then, at the same time, almost, I was learning that the world wasn't the fairy tale I thought it could be.
Okay.
That I was listening to David Icke, your fellow countryman.
Yes.
And our Alex Jones is, very loud.
Yes.
In Texas, kind of a cowboy.
So
I was, I was guided actually to look into what at that point was only like the movie The Matrix. It wasn't really even prevalent at the time as conspiracy theory. And I'd been exposed to conspiracy theory when I was younger, and I understood about the hippies and I understood about Satanists back then. And I could see cultures and risings of different phenomenon, be they mostly negative phenomenon. And I could see the interplay between these things, but I couldn't see where it was happening in my world until I woke up to conspiracy.
Okay. And you're talking about Kundalini for a moment there. And so from my understanding of Kundalini is almost, well, it's, I know it mostly from like a yogic term, which and it releases something from the base of your spine upwards. Was that similar to your experience, or was it slightly different?
Well, mine was different because it was mostly visual. Pandit Gopi Krishna, who spoke a lot on this topic, he has now gone into the realms of light as well, had a lot of physical symptoms. You can find many of his descriptions on YouTube for free. Pandit Gopi Krishna.
Pandit Gopi Krishna. And, okay.
That's the classic awakening. My awakening started, I didn't know the moment it started. I had looked at a bookmark and it had Thoth.
Oh, right.
Thoth, the god, the Egyptian god Thoth. And I'm an Egyptian girl. I worship Isis and Thoth and all the whole pantheon. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a past life there, obviously. So I picked up the bookmark and I said his name. And then I said his older name, Tehuti. And then I saw a lock open. And then he came to me in my mind's eye and said, "Are you ready? Are you ready to receive the key to the magical machine within you? Are you ready to become a co-creator with universe?"
Mm-hmm.
And I answered with song lyrics. I said, "Yes, I'm ready to fall in love right now." And that was the day it started. And I didn't know. I mean, I thought, what a nice vision, what a nice visitation.
Yes.
I had no clue that what Kundalini was, that it was awakening within me, and that it was going to take me to other dimensions in my consciousness, not my physical body, of course.
Right. So Kundalini then is another way of saying awakening within.
Yes, I'm not sure. I don't want to bastardize it at all.
But that's what it meant for you.
White meaning. Yes. Yeah. For me, it was welcome to heaven. Everything you ever thought was real is here. We'll show you.
Yeah.
And it was a play between my consciousness and God. It was really beautiful. But there were other times where psychic attacks came in from what I call dark consciousness. And then, it wasn't easy. And I had to, going through the Kundalini awakening process, you also go through the history of mankind and all of the darkness that's been on the planet. And it's a very difficult process.
Okay, so that must be more extremely dark, I should imagine. If we're talking the history of what has been done and between humans, if you like.
Oh,
Uh,
yes. It's the collective consciousness that you basically surf like a wave. And for me, for weeks, I would be surfing this wave.
yeah, and is that something you think that we have to go through a bit in order to be able to contrast the light and the heavenly consciousness of the Kundalini, of the awakening, as it were, so that we have to delve into what has been done before, what's possible.
It depends on how deep your soul wanted to go. I believe that everyone does have to come to a reckoning with reality and what reality is for you individually. And for me, it happened to be mystical because I'm a mystic.
Of course, yeah. So it would, in wherever it would be whatever our constructs are, I guess, and that's how we would understand it. And for you, that was a mystical one. Okay, no, that's I can understand that. That's great.
I believe our souls are like at different levels or different ages of consciousness.
Oh right, okay. So because we of reincarnation, that we come back and continue to learn our lessons.
And also, as you know, the younger generation is coming in, we're getting these huge upgrades in our knowledge that some of us are star seeds. Some of us are not originally from this planet. We're from other star systems. I'm from Sirius and I'm originally from Andromeda. So it's wonderful to be able to get a more galactic, celestial story of your history and know that you weren't always a human.
Yeah, okay. So
and I'd also like to point out that in the Egyptian Book of the Dead or Coming Forth by Day, Isis states several times that the Egyptians of that time were from Sirius. And I can't agree more.
Okay. There's a guy I think called Andy Collins, and I think he's very much on the Sirius path. And also there's, I think he's, rather than it being Orion, he's much more, it's actually from Sirius. So that would make sense he would agree with that. I don't
Wonderful.
know. Yeah.
And specifically, I'm from Sirius B, and my spirit guide, or some say shaman spirit spouse, who I channel and talk to and have since I was 30 and had my awakening, his name is Hermes, and we've had past lives together. And he is also of Sirius B.
Okay, so you were from the same neighborhood then? Yeah.
Yes, but I'm originally from Andromeda, so.
Oh right, okay.
In order to come to Earth, I had to come through the portals of Sirius.
Okay, and I'm interested how that knowledge, how you've come to that knowledge. Where that was it, for example, Thoth giving you that information, or I was just wondering how you came about knowing that that's where your lineage is, if you like.
Excellent. I call it like a shaman lady insight on a dark winter night when I turn everything off, light the candles, have the incense, really go into a higher state of consciousness and open and ask the questions, invite Hermes and my higher self or my soul self in, and just the writing starts. It comes. It's magic. How are you going to explain magic?
Okay, yeah. So this is so you write it like automatic writing then?
Well, it's not automatic because no one's got a hold of me. I'm actually interpreting the energy patterns into words that I can understand.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. No, that makes. No, I can completely understand that. And
I believe that all artists and poets and musicians do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would also make sense. You were saying about how can we explain magic, and you were sort of talking about the sort of fourth and fifth dimensions earlier. So I was wondering what because I'm not sure if I know what the fourth and fifth dimensions are, because I hear them a lot on things that I read and so on, and I sort of get it on an intellectual level, I guess, that we've got the third dimension here, that we are on this earth plane, if you like, with the sort of five senses and Quite literally the sort of three dimensions. But so I'm wondering whether the fourth and fifth dimension is something. Is that because it sounds quite a scientific thing, but it's being used quite a lot spiritually. I was wondering, Karine, how you see that. What you think those dimensions are.
Okay, great. So your waking conscious state, your work life, you're watching television, and you're awake. You're in 3D. You're having sense experiences.
Mm-hmm.
When you're daydreaming, well, the thing is when you spoke with the last lady that you interviewed, you were talking about past lives being all at once, right?
Yes,
There's no
linear
time. This is the same thing about dimensions, because they actually are within us and without us, as an outer reality and as an inner reality. The fourth dimension, with Carl, if you know about Carl Jung and his psychology,
yes,
the subconscious is our inner fourth dimension.
Okay.
The fourth dimension is where we go when we dream, but it's also the inner counselor. It's the part of us that has the events of our day in a dream, or works out issues that's going on in our lives through dream time. And it's also a higher part of us that it's now we're getting from the fourth to the fifth dimension, that can speak to those who have passed, kind of having a gateway there and have them in dreams.
So the fourth dimension's like in between.
Twilight. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Most definitely. Okay. But it's the realm where dark consciousness resides, basically, or lives or breeds. We can see when negative people die, their soul goes somewhere, and it's usually stuck in the fourth dimension because it's not high vibrational enough. It doesn't have enough love vibration to get into the fifth dimension. So I don't know how long, but since Egypt, for a very long time, the fourth dimension has been cluttered with dark consciousness and, hungry ghosts, as the Buddhists would put it. But it's our ancestors who, keep reincarnating but don't get healed. And I believe that brings us to the point that we are now at the beginning of the age of Aquarius, or the age of Horus, who is the avenger. He's the one who brings in the age of Aquarius and says, everything must be fair now, and we're going to raise in consciousness again.
Mm-hmm.
And the darkness, will dissipate, because we're all going up a level in consciousness, and that's my hope.
Okay, you said again, as if this is a cyclical thing, and that's happened before.
I believe that when I first incarnated into a human body in Egypt, things were quite different. Our consciousness was much higher. I believe that gods incarnated in Egypt to teach the regular souls, the new babies, so to speak, how to farm and feed themselves and have a culture and grow and live and thrive, actually, because we knew that if their souls were going to grow, we gods would have to leave the planet, because our vibration is too high. There's no free will in that area. You're just happy all the time because you're in God's light. So in order for the human soul to grow, the gods had to leave, and consciousness had to lower into the five senses. And, mostly we still have that today.
Okay.
And that creates the ego, and the ego creates all the psychological issues.
Okay, because we fail to learn that our ego is just part of us. It's not us. It's
there's a difference between ego and your personality or your character, in this play, this God's play, or the Vedas said that God is the great choreographer, and just do well your part, your part, know your character, and do well, and there your duty ends. However, we have gotten, especially in Western culture, caught up in materialism and sense pleasures.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to sidetrack slightly, because you mentioned Thoth and Hermes, and I've read how you also you speak a lot about Hecate, and I was wondering if you'd
Oh,
be.
Hecate.
Yeah, sorry, how do we pronounce it?
Well, you're British, so you're probably pronouncing it correctly. I call her Hecate.
Oh, okay. Oh, Hecate's no. That sounds good to me. So, Hecate or Hecate. I was wondering if you could say a bit more about how it's. I don't want to say how you work with them, but what your relationship is with them. I think that's probably a better way of saying it. And when do you sort of when do you ask Hermes instead of asking Hecate, for example?
Oh, sure. Well, Hecate, I usually only contact once a year around Halloween, and that's to do my yearly reading of my own tarot reading on myself to guide me for the next year and see if anything big's coming up and if I should be prepared for anything. And so she's my psychic guide, my psychic grandmother in
Okay.
that way. And Thoth to me is not Hermes. I do see them as separate entities. Many think they are the same, but Thoth is older than Hermes and different in the sense that, oh, the old Egyptian gods are kind of stiff, to tell you the truth, when I'm interacting with them because they're so high vibration. It's hard for them to express. However, my Hermes is Greek, and that's a lot closer in time period. And although he cannot physically manifest on this plane because the vibration is too low, he can manifest through my third eye, and that's where we communicate.
Right. Okay. That's no. So that made me laugh that they would be a bit stiff, but not the rock and roll. Oh, sorry, I feel like I'm being disrespectful by saying something like that. But
Not at all,
yeah.
because it is funny, and that's the thing about Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus is that he's hilarious and he likes to put a color of funny on everything.
Okay, Trismegistus. That's a name I've read before. It's quite an from Sumeria. Is that right?
Uh, this Hermes is the Greek, and
Ah,
because
okay.
I don't do Sumerian and I don't do Mayan, there's certain and I don't do Abrahamics. There's certain religions and cultures I simply cannot study, and I feel like I'm drawn to my past life cultures, honestly, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
And so Trismegistus means thrice great, 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 great Hermes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might be
Yeah.
mistaken there. So, 'cause, a book I read recently, I think I probably picked it up incorrectly there. Okay, so
Well, he goes everywhere. He's in most cultures through different types of names. The mercurial energy, it's alchemy. It's one of the major components in most things.
yeah. So obviously so it sounds like you're drawn to study where you have from where you've come and from Egypt and so on and when you say study, what is it exactly is it that you study?
What I'm guided to study, I really feel like all my studies have been guided. I started off as a worshiping at Llewellyn's altar, which is a book company here in in the States. Llewellyn wrote all about Wicca and dreams, and so it kind of really gave me a basis of astrology, the tarot, all forms of divination, and it started me into spirit guide contact with the book How to Meet and Work with Spirit Guides by Ted Andrews. And all the little psychic books I picked up of different techniques or runes or psychometry, everything I tried I could do. So it was like really exciting. It was like, I guess, being Harry Potter.
Yeah, I was going to say that does really sound like you made your own Hogwarts there. Um,
Yes.
and with yeah, and so basically whatever you picked up, you're able to sort of go to read it, study it, and then do it. And whether that be working with spirit guides or channeling, for example, is that right? Channeling.
Yes, but like for instance, the Kabbalah has always mystified me, and I found it to be very masculine and calculated, and high magic in some ways is also very masculine and calculated. I'm over intuitive, I'm moony, I'm very feminine.
Hmm.
And so what I'm studying must have some kind of anthropomorphic situation where I feel like I'm engaging with it, I'm gaining a gnosis of it, that I'm experiencing it as it truly is, as its essence. And there's certain religions that I just feel falseness from.
Okay. Was that not that this was? So when you mentioned anthropomorphic, is that why you were drawn to the sort of animism of shamanism?
I actually wasn't drawn to it at all. I'm Native American by blood. I'm Cherokee. And I've always felt like the tribal stuff was baser and lower chakra and animalistic, and even animus, has many different meanings. And I take the Jungian white man meaning of the animus.
Right.
And I was never really into shapeshifting or any of that. It was very intellectual. I'm an Aquarian. And I found like the way it's for some people, nature in that way, in the tribal way, is into their heart. But the way into my heart was through meditation and Buddhism and the healing waters of love that I found in Buddhism.
Yeah. And I think this takes us back to when you were because what was it you made you do Reiki? Because you were from Reiki, you found your sort of Buddhist guru. So what brought you to Reiki then?
Well, I was Wiccan at age 15, 16. And by age 17, I was reading tarot cards professionally for my peers at a nightclub.
Wow. At 16?
Yeah, well, at 17.
17.
Actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I still wasn't 18. I wasn't even legal to be in the club yet, but there I was working. And I started doing the psychic club, or the psychic fair scene. And in the psychic fair scene, then that's when I was introduced to all the different healing modalities.
Yeah.
And that's where I found Reiki.
Okay. So that must have been quite a club, by the way, where you could go have a drink, a dance, and get your tarots read.
Most definitely. I would love to do that in England sometime.
Yeah.
I think that would be fabulous.
I'd be there. Absolutely. That sounds a great laugh. And so from then you sort of fairs, and then you the healing modality, healing energies, and so on, and brought you to Reiki, and then so from Reiki then to Buddhism.
Yes, to my guru and Buddhism, and that was a whole other thing. And I was also very heavily into the author Dion Fortune. From the Aleister Crowley days, but I don't really like Crowley. I do like Dion Fortune, and anyone who wants to get deeper into the mysteries of Isis and real kind of occult priestessy stuff, I would suggest Dion Fortune's works.
Okay, well, that sounds a good recommendation. Thank you. Dion Fortune, was that?
Yes, Dion Fortune. She's also there from England, but this was in the 30s and 40s.
Okay. It's So one thing I'm finding fascinating is that it's the mix of Buddhism, and my understanding from Buddhism, it's very much a philosophy, not a religion or anything like that, and the mix that you have with that and the sort of past lives and the sort of goddesses and Hermes and gods, and how you almost seem to seamlessly it seems a seamless trying to think of the right term here, seamlessly be able to stitch it together as your beliefs, as your belief system.
Yes, because it was like the blossoming of a flower. It was a gentle cultivation. And I blame Hermes, actually. I feel like I was cultivated and raised, like a lotus in bloom.
Oh, that's right.
It's very poetic.
It is. It's
really
beautiful.
What I mean.
Yeah. So
sorry to speak in poems.
Yeah, no. Please, you carry on. It makes up for my sort of flustering at the moment. Yeah, but so do you have an idea of what where how you bloom, how you're going to continue to bloom, or are you just prepared? Are you just happy to sort of wait for what comes?
Well, actually, I have difficulties because I have lofty visions. I do see the fifth dimension. I've been home to my heaven home, and it's beautiful. And I understand what awaits me once I allow this body to do what it does. I guess we call that death. I don't know if I will have death or ascension. I'm full of questions, actually, at this time of great change and a shift in our environment. I see the difficulties, and I do see that I think a lot of people are going to die, not to be a bummer, but I do.
Yeah.
And I also see a possible exaltation, a possible mass enlightenment. And that's, of course, my great hope. So I'm actually full of questions. I have answers, but it was like that test was 5 years ago. And maybe we're still coming out with that information. It's still very new information to a lot of people. But it's like, what happens next? And I think that's the quandary of the shaman.
Okay, but you say that you've actually sort of seen where you end up, well, not end up, but where you're heading. Does is that something that feels good within inside you, um, or does that feel unsettling? I mean, I wonder if, because you're asking if it feels unsettling, because there are lots and lots of questions.
Yes, I love being curious. I'm Wonder Woman. I am Alice and I do wonder. I wonder all the time. And I think it's my biggest hobby. And I think that's part of the genius God in all of us that has to wonder about everything, even why roses are red, just silly things, even. And so I guess when I really got into my heart, I could regress to a childlike way of viewing things that is poetic, that has no intellectual, got to get it done, got to solve it, got to know feeling to it. It's really just experiencing it. And I feel like at my core, that is what's going on with me. However, I'm very intellectual, so I do like to pick things apart and wonder what's next. And I feel like I'm either going to be very influential on a world stage, or I'm going to die a lonely cat woman.
Which would you prefer?
I'd love to be influential. It's because my soul wants to work.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like I'm here for. I'm not here just to raise some kitty cats.
Right, because I was lucky enough to interview Bernard Alvarez the other week, and he's very much sees himself as a spiritual activist, and I wondered if you see yourself in that mold as well.
Yes, I believe that there are many here that are on missions, and this is our last mission. I believe we've incarnated, most of us, since Egypt, or some would say Atlantis. I was not there, but some of you guys were. And just all these different star seeds coming in from the Palladians. And, you've
Yeah.
heard of them, just
Yes.
all the different indigo children, the rainbow children.
Yeah.
So my higher self, my soul, when I asked her why the heck did we incarnate, she said two different things. She said to get our hands in the dirt, which means to literally do the work, not just talk about it, not just spirit guide about it, but put on a body and do the work. And that's how she is.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing she said was she was here for the party. So it makes me anticipate that before I let go of this body, there's going to be a world celebration.
Okay, well, that's very good to hear. Because it can feel at the moment like we're heading towards World War III. So from what you were just saying earlier about things that you might have seen as well,
Hermes has prepared me because I'm very sensitive. And if I'm not prepared, I will freak out. So I think it's good for all of us to prepare because, anyone who's listening to the show is probably quite intuitive.
Yeah. But do you think we could change that probability? Do you think we could make a change by so that it didn't happen?
I believe that it's all staged, that all these lives that we've even been through are all little plays, little stage plays, little Shakespearean numbers. And this happens to be a big one. And it's shaped up this way, but it's been, I think, since Roman times planned to be this way. I believe this is the Abrahamic religions really having their day. And hopefully there'll be, a great reckoning and a cleansing and a coming together. And even, higher learning that I've been getting from Hermes is that the fourth dimension, that whole collective consciousness, possibly the ickiness of mankind getting cleared out, is making way for the fifth dimension to come closer, which means a lot more people into higher consciousness, or as we call it, Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
And really all that is opening of the third eye, which is a gateway to the collective cosmic consciousness.
Okay, and the third eye being the pineal gland.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
okay.
what Rick Strassman calls DMT is the chemical that it secretes, but really it's all just magic, and then science puts words on it.
Yes, I prefer that way round. Actually, I think that works better for my sensibilities. I think so because it's, from what you say, it sounds almost as if the world is, as you say, all the world's a stage, as Shakespeare might put it. But we each play our part. But that the world is coming to its own shamanic death and rebirth.
Right. And some would say that even Earth, Gaia herself, is going through a birthing process, and the pole is shifting, and, there's all kinds of evidence, physical and metaphysical.
Excellent. Okay. Well, it's I say excellent as if that's but yeah, obviously disaster and tragedy ahead. But from that, that's right. But from that will be enlightenment. So that's something to look forward to. There was another thing that I read from Paloon that I would love your thoughts on, which was around, and you mentioned it earlier, around hungry ghosts.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could give us just some of your thoughts around what ghosts are, and particularly around what hungry ghosts are, because I think that ties into what you were saying about the fourth dimension. And it sounds almost as if this death and rebirth kind of helps those trapped in the fourth dimension to be released, I think, from where they are at the moment.
100% correct. It does help them. I do have a video on my YouTube. I'm Occult Priestess on the YouTube, and it's called Third and Fourth Dimensions. I don't know. Look around. There's one about ancestors, and I think that's what we're really talking about right now. There's two different types of consciousness, if you will, in the fourth dimension that concern us here. One is hungry ghosts, which are our ancestors, or people who've died in very particularly horrendous ways, or lived in very particularly horrendous ways on purpose by their choice, by their free will, did terrible, horrible things, and got lost in the ego, and even after death are lost in the ego in a dark, soulless, sad existence, or in a very violent, terrible existence. And it's really, your own fabricated hell, and that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, we can take from many different labels. We can call them archons, which is the Gnostic calls dark consciousness archons. The Palladian lady, Barbara Marciniak, calls them Lizzies or lizard people. David Icke also has the lizard angle going on there.
He does, yeah.
But we can just say, simple label, dark consciousness. It's not a scapegoat. It actually exists. It's there. It's in the fourth dimension. And it's using people. It's using bodies. And it's basically, it can possess. And it can possess a body from birth to death. So I would conjecture that some of those people are our world leaders, just like David Icke would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I do see, this very dark, networked, hierarchical force of darkness. But why did we need that? We needed that to grow the souls so that humanity could, become light beings, basically. So how do you grow a soul? Well, obviously you agitate it with Saturn. And Saturn, or Satan or Saturn, it teaches by restriction. And on a free will planet, you are taught through restriction.
Okay, that sounds quite ominous. Almost as if that if there's almost some sort of that and it's the using of the phrase darkness as if it's quite a sinister dark, as opposed to just a sort of a contrast to light.
Yeah, and I guess I don't like to use the word evil because it has way too many connotations to it. Because to me, evil is merely sickness, really, at its core.
Yeah.
And not to empower it. And believe me, I'm Gothic. I love the moon and the night and the stars and poetry. And she walks in beauty like the night. Very Gothic. However, darkness that I'm speaking of is more like the shadow that used to come to me at night.
Okay. Right. So and the intensity of the feeling of that, and the intensity of what has come before as.
And what it is the feeling of total dominion, something else having control over you, and it has very bad intentions, and you are powerless to do anything about it. And I feel like in a global scheme, we've all been under dominion of the powers that be, and we're breaking out of that in so many ways. And that my biggest point is what I like to teach nowadays is to claim your sovereignty. To, it's all nice to have a pretty queen and all that, but you are the queen, you are the king, you are your soul self, and you're sovereign unto God. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I'd really, really like that claiming your own personal sovereignty, as it were. It is up to us. It is, we are our own gods. That's the sort of what I'm learning on my spiritual journey myself.
And there's always going to be a God above you that loves you more than you're capable of even understanding. And that is the beauty of the universe.
Yes, indeed. Corinne, I think that's a fantastic place to finish our discussion. It's been absolutely brilliant. I have completely loved it. And thank you so much for being so open to tell us your view of the world and of all the things that have influenced you to where you are today. So
I'm so grateful to be my first UK interview, and I have to do a shout out to my favorite artist,
yes.
Kate Bush. Kate Bush! Woo!
That's brilliant. If people want to know more about you, you mentioned your YouTube channel. Is where else can they go to find out more about you and your materials?
The quickest way to get to me is Google Occult, OCCULT, Priestess. And I have a .com, occultpriestess.com. But if you Google me, you'll find my blog. You'll find the movie I was just in called The Nightmare, directed by Rodney Ashner.
Oh, brilliant.
And
you're a movie star.
It's a horror movie. Yeah, but it's a documentary. It's a horror documentary. It's a new hybrid. And they're calling it the scariest documentary ever made.
Okay, well, I've definitely got to watch that. That sounds brilliant.
Excellent. Well, be careful, but it's The Nightmare.
Okay, The Nightmare. Okay, well, we'll look out for that. And thank you very much indeed once again. I really did appreciate your time.
I feel charmed for having been here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Corinne. That was Corinne Wilson. Her devotion to gods and goddesses, Hermes in particular, is fascinating. It doesn't feel that that's my path. However, the phrase Corinne quoted from one of the gods, "Put a body on it and do the work. Get your hands in the dirt." I utterly respect that, and I can understand a world made of many levels and dimensions, each with a different aspect to wonder and perhaps worship or work with. The sense of global change that we discussed, not a pleasant prospect to begin with. Well, I can sense that also, but this is perhaps due to the videos and the articles that I watch and read. Some of it, as Bernard Alvarez pointed out in the last podcast, he referred to it as fear porn. So I wonder if I'm being sucked in a little, that I should turn my attention away from such things and look at ways to serve instead, which is ironically much more towards the sort of gods and goddess path. My next guest is a trans-emotional healer, Lindsay Barn. So I'm fascinated to understand Lindsay's journey and what trans-emotional healing is. Do join me, but until then, be well.